Welcome to Spoken Like a Man, where there's no filters, no fear, just truth. Today I'm sitting with Stacy Rogers, a Kansan mother, entrepreneur, and successful business lady. Now she is running for governor. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, before we really get in, I kind of wanted to give you a little gift. We made you a shirt here.
Yay.
I'll move this up for you.
Yes.
And these are from our sponsor, My Snackies, some freeze-dried
Okay.
goodies.
Let's look at the shirt. Says, nice.
Spoken like a man.
Thank you. Thank you. And
You're very
oops,
well.
oh,
I'm just going to throw that
gifts.
around.
Yep, that's fine.
There you go.
Thank you. Gifts, gifts, gifts. I love these. So these are yummy. Thank you very much.
All right, so I'm going to just kind of dig right in here. Well,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah.
Those are pretty
Let's see.
tasty, by
There
the way. So for those of my audience that are meeting you for the first time here, why don't you tell them who Stacy Rogers is? Who are you? What are you for? What are you about?
Well, I'm a lifelong Kansan, so my family goes back generations in Kansas, and so I was born in Wichita and I'm raised up the road in Newton and graduated from Newton High School, and I've always lived in the South Central Kansas area, so somewhere either in Harvey, Reno, or Sedgwick County my entire life. But I do have family members all across the state, family ties to different parts of the state. So Kansas is home. So yeah.
Okay. So what life experiences have shaped your values, and what really made you make the decision to run for governor?
Yeah. So I am a businesswoman, and so to me, business is very important when I'm looking at what is happening in today's world. Without our businesses, we are just, that's the backbone of this country. And so when you look at smaller towns in Kansas that are dying, one of the reasons is the businesses can't thrive. They don't have the support there's a lot of different reasons that they don't have that support or they can't make it. And one of those is rising costs and a lot of red tape and a lot of things that are put in place that maybe don't need to be there for businesses. And the bigger businesses like the Walmarts and the Amazons and things like that are pushing them out because that makes it easier for somebody to just go online and buy something and not shop local. So I'm a big shop local, use local, get your services local. And that's really, really important to me. So just coming from that business background, I'm also a mom. I was that for a lot longer than I was a businesswoman. So I have 3 boys. They are now 31, 27, and 22. And so, raising them, 2 of my youngest 2 boys have learning challenges. And my middle son, my 27-year-old, has autism, and then my youngest is profoundly dyslexic and profoundly dysgraphic. So growing up, I was a public school, private school, and a homeschool parent. And I also, was in a lot of the therapies and tutoring and different ways that you can educate a child in this state. I'm pretty well versed in all of those options. And so, again, education is really important to me as well because we have failing schools in our state, and so that was another reason to throw my hat in the ring. But when I really started, what really started it off was I was standing in my living room in September of 23. And it was the day that Laura Kelly decided that you could change your gender on your driver's license. And aside from the obvious problem with that, the issue is how many times a day do you show your license to somebody or do you look at it yourself? It's really not a life-changing, thing that helps you on a day-to-day basis get through. It doesn't put food on your table. It doesn't put gas in your car. It doesn't give you a good place to live or a good school to attend. It's kind of a non-issue, in my opinion, in the grand scheme of things, of what could actually affect your life. And our governor chose to use taxpayer time and money to spend on that, instead of paying attention to things that could actually help in our day-to-day lives, like the things I just mentioned. So as I was standing in my living room, I just threw my hands up in the air and I said, I can't take any more of this. I'm going to have to go be governor. And I'd never once had that thought process prior to that moment. But when I said it out loud, it was just like emblazoned on my heart, and it just has not left. And so when I started to talk with people about it, what I got over and over, and I happened to be at the state fair at that time, and I was talking with people, and what I heard over and over was, well, nobody listens to us. Our voice doesn't matter. Our vote doesn't matter. Nobody's working for us anymore. There's a lot of people from Western Kansas that obviously come to the state fair. So I heard a lot of, well, the state line stops at Salina, and that simply isn't true. But I understand their feelings on that, their thought process. And I wish I could say it's just Western Kansas that feels that way, but pretty much anywhere in the state that I've traveled over the last 8 months, I've heard the exact same thing. And even in Johnson County and in Sedgwick County, where supposedly, we have all these elected officials that are just working really hard for us. That is the feeling of most people out there, is that they don't feel heard and they don't believe their elected officials are doing the job that they were elected to do for them. And so I feel like a lot of them are taken over by special interests, and that's who's really calling the shots, and they're not really getting the job done for the people. So once I started talking to people about that really solidified my decision to run and to give people of this state another option and the ability to understand that their voice actually is important. By the way, every race pretty much in this state is popular vote. So if you don't think that your vote matters, you're wrong. It 100% matters. And your voice matters to me. It's valuable. Every single person in this state, whether we're on the same political side or not, when I'm governor, I won't just be governing one political group. I'll be governing all 2.9 million people in this state. And we're not going to agree on everything, but I am sure that if I sat down with each and every person in the state, that we could find some kind of common ground that we could work from.
So what have you learned about yourself through your campaigning, through this journey so far? What are some things that you've learned about yourself here?
Well, I don't know that I've learned it through my campaign. I went into it with this thought process of that this is not for me. This is not about me. So, and this is definitely, God's will in this. And I was told in the beginning, a lot of people say, God told me to do this. And in fact, I was told everybody says, God told me to do this. However, I said something different, and that was pointed out to me multiple times. I said, God set me on this path, and I don't know, the goal is to be governor, but along the way, there are other things that can be accomplished. And the ultimate goal may not be governor. It's God's will, but I don't know what is going to happen along this way. There may be something else that occurs. And I said, but I believe that this is the path that God has told me to take. And so a lot of people have said, wow, nobody ever says that. They say, no, God told me to be governor. And I instead say, he set me on this path. This is the path he's told me to take. Where that is leading is entirely up to him. So
I love that. I pray daily, God, your will be done, not mine.
That's right.
That way I can make sure I'm doing what he wants.
That's
instead
right.
of, it just makes my life better. And I feel like it makes everybody around me a little bit better too.
Yeah.
So what kind of leader do you think Kansas really needs right now?
Somebody that cares, somebody that is willing to listen. And like I said before, we may not agree on everything, but sometimes people just want to be heard. And it's not even, as I've went out there and talked with people, and there's plenty of campaigns we could point at or elected officials that we could point at that people are really angry with, they're struggling with, they don't believe are they can't even get through to their office. Nobody will even return their phone call. And I think that sometimes there may not be an answer to the problem that someone has, or an easy answer or a clear answer or one that can be addressed quickly. But I don't know about you, but sometimes I just need to be heard and know that somebody understands what I'm going through. And that gives me the ability to move on to the next day and the next day. And even though there's not a clear answer, or there's not a answer on the horizon, it allows me to continue to move forward in the hopes that that somebody cares and somebody is thinking through that and looking for that answer. And so, there are a lot of things. I used to be on a city council. I served for 6 years in the great big city of Mount Hope, a whole 875 people, and lovely. I lived there for 15 years. Lovely, lovely town. But one of the things that I learned when I entered that arena was that private citizens, Stacy, says, "Hey, fix this," and it seems very black and white, cut and dry, easy to do. But public servant Stacy has a bigger view of what is going on, because all of the information is available when you're in that position versus when you're a private citizen, where regardless of Cora and all that kind of stuff, there's still some information that is private information that can't be released to the public. And so when you actually are on the other side of that, looking at all the information in front of you, sometimes there are decisions that seem simple on one side, but on my side, it was, man, if I do that for them, I'm going to harm all these people over here. And of course, that is completely true for the entire state. We're a big state, and what is good for Western Kansas isn't necessarily good for Eastern Kansas or South Central Kansas. And so I think we need to, I think we need to pay attention to that, and understand that it's not a cookie cutter fix for this state. And saying, well, just do this and it's going to fix everything, may actually harm another area. And so I don't actually believe in blanket legislation. I think that we need to give some pieces back to different entities, whether it be county, city, or the citizens themselves.
So you said that in your campaign that you're going to be doing a day one audit. So this is kind of a two-part question here.
Yeah.
One, you brought up the legislation. Tell us a little bit more about the day one audit, and then what are like 2 or 3 issues that should be addressed at the legislative level right now?
Yeah. So my day one executive order will be to put together that team of people and to go through each department with a fine-tooth comb, looking for where we have been, as simple as inefficient with the money that's been entrusted to us by the citizens of this state, but also looking for ways that we can add value without taking away, and quite frankly, look for things that have been misused or blatant fraud that has occurred. There is some, and we know that. And just rooting those things out, and being a better steward of the money that the people of this state are faithfully paying in with their taxes. Whether they like it or not, they're doing it. And we have an obligation as a government to take care of their money in the correct way. And I don't think that's been done for a long time, both on the state and in the federal level. I think we're seeing what's happening on federal level, but we need to dial that back and look at the state. And then I've had plenty of conversations where people said, well, we need to be looking at that on the county and the city level. And I 100% agree. My focus is, of course, on the state. This is kind of where we come back to the citizens needing to get an active group base of citizens who are involved in their legislative process, whether they're coming to Topeka on the state level or whether they are attending their county and city meetings. Those are very important to make sure that their voice is being heard, or whether they're running for offices themselves or becoming precinct people inside of their parties. There's lots of ways to become involved and to get active and to work towards good solutions. So, yeah. Oh, the legislative things. Yeah. I think that education is number one. And the main reason, well, there's two reasons that education is number one for me, is that we are having poor outcomes of students. That's the main reason. And the students that are there now are our future. And we've already failed a couple generations of kids with education, whether it be with No Child Left Behind or with changing the curriculum. There's just been some changes that have occurred that have made it more difficult to be successful inside of a classroom than what it was like, for example, when my oldest went to school, who's 31, or when I went to school, that there were just different things that were way things were managed. If you did not do well in a grade, you stayed back.
They made sure you did well instead of pushing you through.
That's correct. And instead we see, graduation rates are okay, but we have poor literacy, poor math skills. And that means those kids are getting pushed through whether they have learned and retained that information or not. And coming from the homeschooling background, one of the things that I taught my kids was I was like, I don't care if you get the right answer. If you get the wrong answer, we're gonna figure that out. But more importantly, I want to know how you got to that answer. What was the critical thinking that you used? What were the resources that you used to find that answer, right or wrong? And let's talk about how we get to the right answer. So instead of just teaching the answer, okay? And so we've gotten away from that a lot in schools. They teach to a test. They teach to, they need these tests to come out to a certain score. They need kids sitting in their seat on a certain day to get the money. There's just a lot of things that go into it that are not really aimed at actually educating the child, but benefiting the money that comes into the school. And while the money that comes into the school is important, when we sacrifice the children and their education for that, that's a problem. And so with such a large amount of our budget going to education, I would not bat an eye if we were having great outcomes. I would give more if we were having great outcomes, but the reality is we're not. And in addition, our teachers are not, they're not seeing the money that they should be seeing, much less our students. And that money is sitting elsewhere, not being utilized. I don't think that a teacher should have to fund their own classroom. That is a big deal for me. And that's always been something that has really bothered me when I would hear about the amount of money that a teacher had to spend to decorate their classroom, to provide supplies for their classroom. That should definitely be supplied by the school system. Mm-hmm. That should not be something. And I remember one of the schools that my kids were in, we had to supply things like copy paper and paper towels and toilet paper. And I just thought, no, this should be taken care of. We're sitting in USD 259 and they get over $18,000 a student and they can't buy toilet paper. I don't know. That was just weird to me that we would be supplying, boxes of Kleenex and those kind of things that should be considered just expenses for the classroom that are covered by the school.
I don't know if I told you this. My sister's actually a teacher. She teaches over at Heights. Her and I don't agree on a lot of things, but something we do agree on is teachers are definitely underpaid.
They are definitely underpaid. Yeah. And they're our front line. And paras and teachers are our front line for our students, and they're directly in charge of their success. And I'm not going to let parents off the hook here. Parents need to be involved. They need to be accountable for their children's behavior inside that classroom.
That was actually going to be kind of part of one of my next questions. So this is, again, kind of a two-parter. So what do you think the leadership on the education should look like under your watch? And how can we support parents and families through legislation? How can we do that?
Well, one of the problems in this state is that the only thing that the legislators can do is the budget. We don't really have any other say in the rest of it. And I think that that's something that needs to change. We'd get a ton of fight and pushback over that. But even when in talking to some of the local school boards, they do not feel like they have a lot of say in what happens inside the individual schools. And so that's often left up to administration, up to the superintendents, and they get a lot of pushback if they don't agree with what the schools want. And so I think there needs to be a lot more accountability and transparency on that school level to show, what are you doing with that money? Where is that going exactly? And not general information, but let's break it down into something those students and teachers and parents can see. And then either they're going to greatly appreciate the job the school's doing, or they're going to have some questions. And they're going to say, hey, we need to fix this. This is not where we want our money to be going and how we want our children to be educated. And I think both teachers and parents would agree with some of that. So we are limited. Now, we could start talking about the Supreme Court question, which changing the way that we select the Supreme Court in Kansas. We're the only state that does it the way that we do it. Once that is changed to where the actual citizens of this state elect and choose their Supreme Court justices, then we have the ability to move forward on some of the education questions. And I think that will be that's something that's up for the vote in August of next year. So there's a year to educate people on how we have gotten to where we are with the Supreme Court. That could be a whole podcast all by itself. But basically, very early on, before I ever let anyone know what I was campaigning for, I asked questions to kind of see where people were at and what they knew and what they understood. And I asked the question, do you realize that you as a citizen of this state have no say in who sits on your Supreme Court of Kansas? And people lost their minds. They thought I was lying. They thought I had no idea what I was talking about. And they said, oh, yeah, the governor has. I said, no, the governor is supplied with choices. It's done by a panel. It's not done by any elected official in this state. And that is definitely something that is not okay with a vast majority of the citizens that I've spoken to. They don't like that idea that they have no say whatsoever, that a committee has that say. And so I think, and some of them were confused. They thought, well, we vote for attention. So what? You vote them off, they're just going to get more bad choices presented, to choose from. And so we really need to take back that piece of it as a state, as a voting group of citizens to make those decisions. Now, probably the biggest pushback I've gotten on that is, and I have a solution, is to not politicize the role of that Supreme Court justice, that position. And I agree with that. It's going to go to a public vote to where if it's passed, then the voting public votes on those Supreme Court justices. But I often ask, how much information do you even get on district judges when they come up, and most people I talk to say, well, I don't know anything about them. So that's an issue for me when we talk about voting in the top judges in our state. And so I think that one possible way to not politicize, not create another special interest issue where we're going to have judges out there campaigning for their position and running campaigns, much like you see any other political position, is to allow them to still be vetted through our legislature. Those would be recorded and released to the public so people could see the way those justices answered the questions, and then also, released to the different groups that, push that information out there and say, well, look, this is who we would recommend that you support. So places like KFL or Kansans for Prosperity or any of those groups that push out their recommendations of who they believe align with what they are trying to accomplish, they'd still have the ability to do that without creating a campaigning issue. So, and so that's one way to address that, so that we still get the information that we need about those candidates for that position without creating huge campaign funds and gigantic campaigns for them.
So like you were saying, it's kind of a transparency issue. And I think most people don't know exactly what you just said. They don't know a lot of that. So digging a little bit deeper on that, transparency in public office, what exactly does that mean to you, and how would you uphold that?
Yeah. Well, one of the good things about me is that I don't have political baggage a mile long behind me. And so to be transparent is pretty easy. I don't have anything to hide when I walk into that office. I would open up the books of this state and dig into it and make sure that the people of the state understood what we were doing with their money. And I think that's the biggest issue, is people want to understand, I'm paying all this money in taxes. Where's it going? Mm-hmm. I'm not seeing it necessarily in my life. I'm not seeing the benefit from it, or I'm not seeing enough of a benefit from it. And so I think being able to open that up and share that with people and help them understand where that money's going, what it's being used for, why we need it, because we do need money to run the state. There's no doubt about that. I think that there are areas that we can tighten up considerably and not take away the value of what is available, and in fact probably enhance it and make it better. So I think that that's a big thing for me, that transparency issue. But I don't have anything to hide when it comes to, I don't have any political decisions that I've made that or things that might not want to be revealed to the public as far as the state level, what's happened in that arena. I don't have any of that hanging over my head. And so that makes me a little bit unique, because most of the other candidates have been around for a long time. They've been in the political arena for 20 years. And so no matter what they've done, they have voting records of choices they've made, good and bad. And they may or may not have things that they don't want the public to know that they've done. And so that's something that will be a lot easier for me to manage, because I'll just be able to open it up and I don't have any fear. Others might be a little fearful of me, but
speaking the truth, I love that, and standing on truth. That's something I really respect about you.
Yep.
So that actually segues pretty nicely into this next one. So how should legislatures handle the controversial topics? Should it be something they play safe on, or is it, this is how it is, this is the truth, and this is what I'm going to stand on?
Well, we get into a discussion of what should be handled by government and what should be handled by the people. And, I look at some of the social issues, and these are issues that would be, I think, better handled in churches, through citizens, through those one-on-one neighbors helping neighbors situations, versus we're going to legislate that to death and make everybody unhappy about it. I don't know anybody that's happy on, quite frankly, on either side of the abortion issue.
Yeah.
Okay. you have people that, regardless of where they stand with abortion, they're either insanely unhappy because it's harmful to moms and babies, or they're insanely unhappy because it's not free enough. It's not what it's. So we're never going to agree on those issues. And I think that when we sit down and have that conversation one-on-one with an actual person going through something, we end up with a different thought process and a different heart process than just telling someone this is the way it has to be. And so there are some things that I think need to come back into, we need to have better access to education about those decisions, access to options that are not necessarily available for women to know about right now. If we're talking about the abortion issue, there's things that could be done and put into place that could happen. Those things are available right now, but they have to get to them. And so I think there just needs to be a bigger voice in that arena to say, this is where you go for that.
I actually really agree with that.
Yeah.
I think the church should actually step up a lot there, because a lot of the reasons you see elective abortions are financial reasons. And I would love to see churches step up and handle that.
That's right.
And step in and help with that.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of the argument is, well, if you're going to force a woman to have a baby, then you need to help that woman. And I do understand that argument to an extent, but we should also back it up to where was the personal responsibility in making that decision in the first place. We all know how babies are conceived. There's a decision that goes into that. And so being able to take that responsibility for your actions as well needs to come into that conversation at some point. And quite frankly, there are people out there that did not have the parental role models that they needed, or the, that support that they needed to make good decisions to begin with. And then in that case, I do think it's the church's responsibility to come along and say, how can we support you now? We understand this is where you're sitting today. Can we help you understand what responsibility looks like? Can we help you understand what, quite frankly, that doesn't even have to happen inside of a church. It can be a secular group that does that as well. We have just really lost the responsibility of people. If we make a mistake, we want somebody else to come clean it up instead of taking that responsibility ourselves and cleaning it up for ourselves. Accountability. That's correct. And we need to teach that, I don't think that's something that is really, it's certainly not valued in our society anymore. So, yeah.
You know what? Actually, I'm going to skip that. I'm going to think. If elected, what is the first piece of legislation you'd want to champion? You get behind?
Well, there's a lot of vetoed bills out there right now. Not, I know we got some overridden in this last session, but the session before that was something like 64 bills or some craziness that Laura Kelly had vetoed. Some of those have since been passed, but I would go back and look at those first and see what we could, resubmit and talk about again and fix, because some of them were really good. One of them did pass, and that was the no foreign countries can purchase land near our military installations. However, I don't think they should purchase land anywhere in our state, not just near military installations. That did cover the majority of our state, but I think it probably left 10% or something like that available, and that's too much for me. So when we sell land to another country, it's no longer our land, and that to me is a national security risk. We've got a lot of things going on already where some of that land has been sold to foreign countries already. And so I have a lot of concerns over that for sure. So that'd be something I look at right away. And then anything education related, looking at that to clean that up. Whether that be school choice, and that's a longer conversation. There's a lot of thought processes on that, and somebody will bring me another thought on that, and I'll have to add it in and kind of process through that with everything I already know. So I don't know that I've come up with an exact right answer for what school choice should look like, but because I do respect the different perspectives of smaller schools, rural school districts, home schools, private schools, and the public schools. I will say, I was thinking about this the other night, and one of the biggest things that people bring up to me is how this would be harmful to public schools in rural areas. And I have to disagree with that. And the reason for that is we already have school choice in this state. So if you can get your child to the school of your choice, they can go, as long as the school takes them. Okay. But they're no longer held by territorial boundaries that keep them in a specific school district. If they want to go, if they're sitting in 259 and they want to go to the Andale School District, they can go to Andale if Andale will take them. They could go to Newton if Newton will take them. So out in rural Kansas, I just have a hard time seeing where there would be a mass exodus out of public schools at all anyways. I just don't, if that's what's available, I don't believe that they would see what we've already seen in 259. When school choice became a statewide thing, we saw a mass exodus out of Wichita school districts, and they went to the surrounding districts, or they went to the surrounding districts mostly. Some went to private schools, but they already had, everybody already had that choice to go to a private school or homeschool if they wanted to in the state of Kansas. So it was more of that leaving for different school districts. I don't know that it would harm rural schools in the same way that they think they're going to harm. Now, it does give an opportunity for micro schools and for private schools to be created in those rural areas, that if that money follows the child, that maybe wasn't available before because of, things like lower income in rural Kansas and different challenges like that, where that would actually create opportunity and then thereby create competition. But for the most part, I think a lot of the rural schools and smaller schools in a lot of ways do a better job than our larger schools. There's always challenges with any of them, but I just don't see how it would harm them as much as I think they're afraid that it will at this point. That was kind of a thought process that I was having. I just don't see it.
I actually really agree with you.
Yeah.
I went to smaller schools, and when I went to school, it's a lot different than what it is now. Now it's, if you get the teachers are calling to the parents are griping at the teachers. When it wasn't that way when I was a kid. I went to a smaller school. You've got the school saying, "Hey, this is going on with your child."
You
and
better
it's
hope
addressed.
the teacher doesn't call home.
You bet.
Yeah.
It's changed a lot, and I think that's a lot of our issue. That's
again,
something
that goes back to that responsibility. That's the responsibility of the parent. Not being accountable for their child's behavior. There was not a time, that I did not go to the school. And so we went from the Sedgwick County School District. When I moved, we ended up in the Haven School District. And so we went from Sedgwick County Co-op to Reno County Co-op. And we actually had a really good experience. We were in the Goddard School District. We actually had a really good experience in the Goddard School District. We had 2 paras for my son. We were sent home with a notebook every day with paragraphs of how his day went, how he did, where he struggled. And we had a different experience when we went to a smaller school district where they would allow him to do things that were not okay. So there is, and I was definitely a parent that was involved. And, I would have lengthy discussions with my children about their behavior in school and what was appropriate and what was not. And, but I also held the teachers and the schools accountable for their behavior as well. And so at one point they said, well, we just let Wesley sit under his desk. And I said, why? That's not allowed anywhere else. No other kid gets to do it. Why are you allowing him to? Well, he just wants to get under there. So then he should be in trouble. It's not appropriate. But they were not holding up their end and enforcing the rules on their level. It wasn't that my child wouldn't obey those rules. He didn't act like that when he had been in the other school district. They were allowing that in that classroom. And I said, no, that's completely unacceptable. You tell him to get up and in his seat. And if he doesn't, call me. I'll come help. I'll sit in his classroom and put a little rear end in his seat. I don't care.
I was one of those parents.
Yep. So we need more parents like that are willing to be responsible and accountable for their children. And I understand people work and we have, families that are working 2 and 3 jobs. And I get that, but there's groups, there's actually churches that are stepping up and being that accountability partner. So there's ways to get those mentors in the school and get people helping your kid stay on the right path as well. So, if you're out there struggling as a parent and you want to do those things for your kid, reach out to your school and say, hey, do you have something like this? And if they don't, start calling the churches and say, hey, do you have people that want to come alongside these students and work with them? There are resources out there. So
I like that. So I'm kind of, I don't know if you've noticed, I'm digging into kind of what your mission is, what your goals are. So for like 5 years into your office, what's kind of your mission? I'm getting education for sure, working on education, making sure our land isn't getting bought up by foreign entities, some going back on some of the vetoed bills. What in the 5 years, what is your mission? Do you have a main mission here?
Yeah. So I think this kind of goes back to how I'm campaigning right now and what I'm hearing from the people of the state, where they're saying, look, my voice doesn't matter. It doesn't count. Nobody's listening to me. Nobody's working for me. So when people go to vote now, they are left with just a couple choices. They're left with, I walk in there and I say, well, I don't really think any of these people are working for me. I don't really agree with them. I don't believe them. But they're the lesser of the two evils. It doesn't matter what side you're on. I heard somebody say the other day, vote blue no matter who. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's like the worst mentality ever. But it's the same thing as if you are a Republican and you say, oh, I'm just going to vote R down the whole way because we couldn't possibly have a Democrat in there. But they're not really believing that these people are working for them. It's just the lesser of the two evils. Why are we settling for that, first of all? Okay. And then there's a group of people who aren't settling for that. Well, sort of they are, because they're just checking out completely. They're completely apathetic about what is happening. And they say, you know what? Nobody is working for me. I feel helpless and hopeless. I can't do anything. I can't make a difference because nobody cares anyways. So I'm just going to check out and go do my own thing, be in my bubble. And when they check out of that election voting process, they typically check out of their communities as well. And so as I'm going around and talking with people, I'm asking them, what are you doing to be involved? How are you getting involved? Because I don't believe that we can be effective until the population is involved and active. And we just have a huge apathy problem in this state. So
sounds like your goal is kind of to wake up the public.
Yes,
right?
Wake up the public. So we need a good, strong population that's active, and we need a good, strong governor. We can work together to then clean out the legislature and put good servant leaders in those positions. And we have some great legislators in there. There's some great people that were elected this last election cycle. So don't hear me say anything I'm not. But there are others that have been there a very long time that need to go. It's not how our government was set up. It was set up for that farmer to come in from their field, serve their term, and then go home back to their farm. And what we've created today is careers. So I firmly believe in term limits. That's something else that I will be pushing for very hard. They did have a bill this year. It did not go anywhere regarding term limits. I doubt it will make it through this session either. But it had some weird language in it, because it was told to me, and I was like, I don't know that that's gonna go anywhere, and it didn't. And so they need to figure that out a little bit, how that language needs to look for it to be useful and able to pass. And then, but I'm definitely for term limits. I think we need to clean house and get special interest groups out, where it is the voice of the people who is in our elected officials' ears, not those special interest big money groups like it is now.
So I know you've spoken about people are saying their voices aren't heard, and you're hearing that a lot. What's your message to those guys that are feeling disillusioned or that they aren't heard? What is it that you have to say to them?
Yeah. The best thing you can do, first of all, I tell people all the time, let's stop looking at the federal issues so much. Yes, there are things federally that affect us. Yes, those are the things that we need to pay attention to. But there's a lot of things that happen federally that don't affect us on a day-to-day basis. They may affect us grand scheme, but they don't affect us on a day-to-day basis. And quite frankly, I think they're used to distract us in a lot of ways. So taking it down to state level, there's a lot of things that you should pay attention on the state level. And then there's some things that, again, won't affect you in your day-to-day life and need to be taken down to your county and city and then your personal responsibility level. And the more things that we can get down into the county and city level and then that personal responsibility level and to activate those people, that's where we're going to see that real change. And it's not going to happen overnight. And it's not going to happen, we're not all going to agree on everything. It's going to take cooperation. It's going to take good servant leadership that's actually listening to their constituents. And if they're not, our process to get the people that is our elections. And so again, you have to be involved. It is done by a popular vote. The only thing is our national elections that are done on the not on the popular vote. And so we can make a difference in our communities by simply making our voice heard. And that is the way we make our voice heard the most efficiently. Do you know, I hear this all the time, and I've been traveling for 8 months now straight all over. And in some of the more populated areas, when I go to Johnson County or I go to any other county in this state, do you know what I hear about Wichita? It's blue. It's blue. You're totally blue here. And I said, no, we're really not. We're not blue. We're very conservative. There's a small faction of people that are blue, but what has occurred is because of that apathy issue where the loud voices have frightened the bigger majority of the voices. And we need to not be afraid to make our voice heard. And I think that is a big, so taking business, for example, cancel culture. Boy, if you say the wrong thing, you're going to get canceled and that's it. And you're out. And I think that is something that we're starting to see a pushback on pretty strongly, where people say, you know what, you're not canceling me. I didn't do anything wrong. These are my beliefs, and I can stand on those. And you have the right to do that. And I've seen people come around those businesses who have stood their ground and supported them even more. And that's the other reason why I don't believe we sit in a blue area, because that if we really were in a blue area, that wouldn't be happening. It'd be going the opposite way. People would be condemning those on the right that stood their ground, and vice versa. If you were in a blue area and it was truly, if you were a blue business, let's say, and had those liberal democratic thought processes, and And then the conservatives said, well, we're not going to support you. If you were truly in that area, you wouldn't do well, right? Well, I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing that in our Wichita area. And quite frankly, I don't see it in the Johnson County area either. A lot of our business people in Johnson County are actually conservatives, but they're afraid. They've been told they can't voice who they are. When I was at the Johnson County Fair, it was mostly that would pass by the table, mostly Republican conservative people that were stopping, and it was the majority of them. It was not a minority of people. And I think that that's very telling, that we just have this apathy issue where people are afraid to use their voice. They're scared. They're tired. They feel hopeless and helpless. And so if I could say anything to them, is that you need to make your voice heard. And it's not always going to be comfortable. That's important to know. And if you're a Christian out there, you should already know this, that speaking the truth is not comfortable. And you're often ridiculed for it. And you're often told you're stupid for thinking that. And you're often told that you're a Bible thumping, clutching your cross type of person, that, and you don't really have anything else going for you. And those things can be hurtful and stop people, because they want, we've got this God is love, and we're supposed to love everybody, and we don't want to ruffle feathers, and we don't want to make waves. But the truth is, that's not what the Bible says. The Bible says we are to love. And now, speaking specifically to our Christian people, that we're supposed to love and correct, but that doesn't mean that we're not supposed to speak truth in the process to non-believers as well, or to people that don't agree with us. And so I think making our voice heard is incredibly important, and we're not doing that well. Mm-hmm. Especially when it comes to that voting process. And so when people tell me, oh, we're blue in these areas, I said, no, we're really not. They're just not letting their voice be heard. So if I could say anything to them, is go make sure your voice is heard. And the easiest, and quite frankly, the most private way you can do that is through your vote, because nobody knows what you vote. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, in theory,
yeah, in theory,
as long as we believe the elections are handled appropriately. But no, I mean, but truthfully, nobody knows how I vote on anything when I step into that voting box. That's the whole point of it. It's supposed to be your vote, and it's supposed to be private, and you're not supposed to be condemned for it and ridiculed for it. And so that is your space to make your voice heard the loudest, without bringing any, I guess, personal harm to yourself, if that's what you're really concerned about. So
I like that. So I'm going to ask, I've got your campaign stuff. I'm going to ask some personal questions a little bit for a wrap up here. So what do you want your kids or future grandkids to remember about this chapter in your life?
Yeah, that I fought for them. I fought for their future. That I want them to, when I was growing up, things were simple, much more simple than they were now. And obviously, my grandparents and my parents would say they were rough, but I don't think that my grandparents would even recognize what things look like today. And so I always hope that my kids and my grandkids can be raised in, or my kids can raise my grandkids in a way that is more reminiscent to that. Can we give children back their innocence that I feel like is taken away at such an early age these days, where they're exposed to things on such a grandiose level, whether the parents, no matter how good the parents are at keeping their children away from things, it's pervasive. It's everywhere you look. You walk into a store and your kids could see something that you don't want them to see. And you just anything. It's just everywhere. And so I would love to see that simpler time. that time where, what kids were not, their focus wasn't on a TV set or a game console, but it was outside trying to make a stick look like a gun or a knife or and play cops and robbers.
Joes.
Okay, play cops and robbers and play, good guys, bad guys, whatever, climb trees, a lot of people say touch earth. Let's touch some earth, people.
Yep.
Let's get
Put
back
your
out
feet
there.
in the grass.
Put your feet in the grass and enjoy some of the things that God has given us naturally. So
I like that. You want to know that you fought for them and
yeah.
you wanted to have things just set right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. All right. Well, thank you again very much for being on Spoken Like a Man. I hope you enjoy our freeze-dried candies there.
Thank you so
and
much.
hopefully you wear my shirt. I
Yes,
worked
yes,
awful
yes.
hard on that just today for you.
Awesome. Well, as you have seen, whenever I get a shirt, I wear it and I promote it. So you'll be seeing that soon on my social media. And you can find me on any social media out there. All of them, including Snapchat and TikTok.
She's all over. We're going to help
I'm
push
on
her out
everything.
there. Spoken
Yeah.
Like a Man loves Stacy here,
Yeah,
so we're going to be helping
thank
her
you.
out as much as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Stacy. I really appreciate it.
Yep. Have a great day.